Welcome to District 216, the intersection of art, music, cannabis, and psychedelics. We're very lucky today to have Greg Spivak, and my name is Cole Lupoli, and I think Greg's going to tell us a little bit about himself, but first off, can we have a round of applause for Greg? Growing up, were you interested in psychedelic culture, psychedelic music?
It's funny. I was always interested in Eastern sort of practices. I grew up like watching a lot of like martial arts movies and a lot of like learning a lot of or being interested in a lot of different Eastern practices and seeing a lot of like mushroom lore, like a lot of those old school mushroom imagery you see in European kind of photos and things like that. A lot of hard to explain. My grandparents come from an immigrant family. So we would go visit my family in the Czech Republic growing up. So I would just see a lot of old school imagery of mushrooms. And I was always fascinated with them. But my dad actually came over here from Ukraine as a Jewish refugee, and was a surgeon. So he's very, very stubborn, being from the old country, and he's very Western medically oriented, being a surgeon. So I grew up in that sort of household, which anything like hippie related or drug related was like instantly dismissed, and like I was like told it's bad, and not to be like obviously not to be interested in that. But I naturally just was interested in it. And it's funny, recently my mom just moved houses, and she was going through some of the old cabinets, and in the old cabinets she pulled out these like ceramics pieces of mushrooms that I had made in high school. I took 2 years of ceramics when I was in high school as a freshman and as a senior, and I just made mushrooms out of clay, and it's just kind of funny. Like I completely had forgotten about I had done this, and so she had shown me some of these pieces, and some of them were actually pretty amazing. I made like a mushroom lamp, and so it's just kind of funny how like that sort of came back 15 years later to plus or maybe a little bit less than that to actually be a big impact on my life and my trajectory, not just personally, but as a career and everything else.
So likewise, your first experience with mushrooms, were they profound? Were they, spiritual, or was it just kind of, fun partying, exploration, stuff like that?
Yeah. So my first experience with mushrooms, I was in high school, and I didn't know what I was doing. My older brother's friends thought it was it was cool to give me some mushrooms, and I was wanting to be like cool, hang out with my older brother's friends. I ate a bunch, had no idea what I was doing, and proceeded to have an insane experience. Right, the walls are melting in on me, and it's actually pretty funny. My mom woke up my mom was asleep the whole time. This is the nighttime. She actually woke up in the night, and we're out of our minds and walking around the house like trying to be normal, and she asked me to change the clocks. It was daylight savings time, and I was like, okay, yeah, Mom, sure, I'll do that. And the next morning, every fucking clock in the house was a random time, some random ass time, just what it was. So that was a very intense experience. I'm like, I'm not doing that again. That was wild. So flash forward to 2018. I was on a backpacking trip on the top of the Sierras, and part of the plan on the backpacking trip was to do mushrooms. And around this time, I had really been exploring consciousness, getting into breath work. I had become a Wim Hof Method instructor at this point. I'm meditating on a consistent basis, and I'm getting more and more interested in the power of psychedelics. I see a lot more things coming out in the news, research, and all that sort of stuff. And that curiosity component was there. And I had a very life-changing experience at the top of the high Sierras on a backpacking trip where I felt like I had taken like a monkey off of my back. The pressures of that were put onto me from everything from my father to society, everything, that I was able to shed those experiences and be able to just really step out of this old version of myself and really come out of my shell in a way. And it's almost like I was reborn, you could say.
So at that point, were you like, wow, these are really incredible compounds?
Yeah, it was a life-changing moment for myself, 100%.
Can I ask you a question on that?
Yeah.
So what do you think makes the difference between a recreational experience? I mean, did you go into that with kind of a recreational, were you trying to take the monkey off your back? Or was it more recreational and it turned into transformational?
I think everything, when you are, I guess, in touch with the way things operate in the world, synchronicities, so sort of just happen, And I think I wasn't really necessarily looking for anything. Like I consciously was aware, but subconsciously, I needed that, and that was where I was going. And from that moment, I was able to really realize that, like, hey, you're really hard on yourself. You push yourself really hard, and you don't love yourself enough. And it's hard to be in relationships with other people and to love someone else if you can't love yourself first. And that was like, I laughed, I cried during that moment, or during that journey, because I realized, how hard I had been on myself. I didn't need it to be like that. I needed to celebrate like the small wins, throughout my life, so I could overall like go further and be more and enjoy this life. Since then I've come to realize that this whole point of this human experience is to enjoy your life and to be happy. And you look around the world and you see like the greatest cause for disability in the world now is anxiety and depression, and that's sad. We're not enjoying this human experience that we have. And I think we all deserve, it's our human right to be happy and to enjoy our lives.
I totally agree with that, and I think psychedelics can help you get that kind of perceptual shift to maybe see things from a different example. Like I had an experience with LSD where I realized that if something was coming up, I could always prepare for it. It was very simple, but if something was arriving, I could always prepare for it, and if I couldn't, then so be it. It was coming anyways, and it's something that seems very obvious. And did that play any role in you wanting to be a microdosing coach? And what is a microdosing coach, by the way, and why do we need one?
I'll answer the first question first. It set the path. So at that point, I was just a more of like a trainer. I was just taking people through functional workouts, and then sort of getting into like the health coaching space, exploring different aspects that go into its concept of optimal health. So nutrition, sleep, other kind of lifestyle kind of things. And what I started realizing is, as I started working with more and more people, exploring this concept of what is optimal health and wellness, is like it comes back to your intention that you're doing something with, right? If you're not enjoying, if you go on a diet, or if you start working out but you hate it, you don't really understand why you're doing it, then you're not going to wire and fire these new habits that are part of your lifestyle. You're just doing something and you're suffering through it, right? Instead of being intentional with it. So it all comes back to the amount of consciousness that you bring into whatever activity you're doing. If we're having this conversation right now, I'm engaged in the conversation. I'm not thinking about going home and doing whatever, scroll on Instagram or whatever else. I'm here and now in the moment, because that's the only time that I can be happy. You can't be happy in the past or the future. It's only right now. So naturally, I got into microdosing and started realizing that microdosing is a tool to enhance your consciousness, just like meditation is. So I started incorporating that into my practice, and then that's just sort of grew from there.
So there's a ton of different protocols. If you go online, you go on Reddit, people say take these milligrams, take those milligrams every other day. I mean, there's so many different protocols. Having done it and kind of specializing in it, what would you recommend for someone that, or does it depend on what you're dealing with too? I mean, if you're depressed versus anxious, you're trying to overcome trauma, what would be sort of the different approaches, and what would you say?
Yeah, so everyone has a different tolerance level naturally. So people methylate differently. So some people need a lot more to have to feel something, whereas some people need a lot less. But that's sort of like the extremes. Most of us sort of live in the middle. So I recommend people to start with a microdose around 125 milligrams. That should be just enough to where you're feeling the benefits, but not so much the effects. You don't want to be feeling really effects if you're going for a microdosing experience, because then you're sort of past that realm into what I call the museum dosing realm, which is like this middle ground. It's the amount that you want to take if you go to a museum or look at all this amazing art on the walls and be able to be in extra awe of it. You're able to see the extra details that your normal, more egoic mind might keep from you, because you're busy to get to the next thing. You're rushing out of the present moment, right? So a microdose you should feel the benefits of being more aware, more conscious, less stressed, less anxious. It's more in the present moment. You should feel things such as you should be experiencing like the neurogenesis benefits of it. Those are some of the benefits of microdosing. So if you're feeling the benefits, what I say is to take it in the morning, forget about it. At the end of your day, audit your day. How did you feel? How was your day? Were you more conscious? Were you more aware and in tune? Did you feel more like yourself, more alive in your body and the world? Yeah, cool. You had a successful microdosing day. That's microdosing. Now, if colors are really popping, everything's way more vivid, and you're a little bit more giggly, and you're probably on the higher end of microdosing, borderlining into museum dosing. And that's what you want to do, then consciously, go in that realm. But don't think that you're going to try to get a bunch of like computer work done if you're in that headspace. Like that's cool and all to go, play around and do that, because we need to play as human beings. But we also, have time where we have to work. We want to get stuff done and be more focused and in tune. So you want to take a measured, calculated dose if you're going to microdose and try to go about your normal work day.
And frequency-wise, would you say take it every day for a week? Would you say every third day? What are the various approaches, and how effective have you found them?
Yeah, so I recommend a protocol of 4 days on, 3 days off. There's no one right way. We're kind of figuring this out right now. There's studies going on right now where people are sort of giving their anecdotal experience of what works best for them, whether it's 2-2 or every other day, 4 on, 3 off. I know that the Fadiman protocol, which is James Fadiman's one of the researchers focusing on microdosing. That's one of the protocols that he put out early that he recommended. So I've always sort of stuck to that and advised that for people who want to get into a microdosing protocol, to do that for a period of time. And then when they feel intuitively that they want to move to something else, to intuitive usage, then do that at that point. But at least give it a month or 2 months of being consistent with it. If they want to get all the benefits to be had from microdosing, like the new pattern behavior or whatever it might be.
So you'd say essentially give it a month, see where you're at.
Yeah.
I like what you said too, journaling every day, because I've microdosed myself, and I found when I took notes afterwards, I could look back and be like, you know what, actually I did get more work done on Tuesday. And I think another part that I found, I want your feedback on this, is talking to your friends.
Yeah.
Hey, was I more lucid? Maybe I was a little funnier? Did I come up with the better ideas? Things like that. Do you think it's good to get feedback from the people around you, and do you
100%.
recommend that?
Yeah, if you have a spouse or friends, roommates, whatever it might be, ask them, like, have you noticed a shift in me this past month or this past week, and talk about it. If you really are wanting to get these, all the benefits out of it. So there, journaling is great. Talking with your loved ones, auditing your day, putting it up for review. They're all great protocols to get all the benefits out of microdosing.
And so where does tolerance come in? Because I've experienced psilocybin on multiple occasions, back-to-back days, and you end up just needing to eat more and more and more fungus. How does that work with respect to this?
So psilocybin works on your serotonin receptors. So you obviously have certain amounts of serotonin in your body at a certain given time. So if you have a big dose, like you said, and like the next day you want to do another big dose, it might not be as powerful as the first day, because you've obviously depleted the well a little bit and you haven't given enough time for it to regenerate. So that's to be expected. When it comes to microdosing, the 3 days off is so you don't build up too much of a tolerance. It's just like drinking coffee. If you drink coffee every day, you're going to need more caffeine. So you kind of use it, as a tool, but like, if you abuse it and you drink it all day long, then you're going to need it more and more and more. And then obviously there's side effects of that. So with microdosing, the 4 on 3 off protocol allows for receiving all the benefits from it. And even on the days off, you'll feel the residual bleed over benefits of being more aware and more present in your day, because now you're literally wiring and firing new nerve endings in the brain. So these are literally new behaviors that are being wired and fired. So you'll feel the benefits of that on your days that you're not taking it, and you'll feel it, even months later if you've done it for a while and created these new habits of, positive behavior.
So just so I'm understanding you properly, so when tolerance does build up, the good things like the neurogenesis and the plasticity is still occurring, even if some of the effects become diminished over a period of time, right?
Sure.
The other build-up effects.
Yeah.
So likewise, have you explored microdosing with any other compounds? I've heard of microdosing mescaline. I've heard of microdosing MDMA. What's your opinion on all of that?
So I've only microdosed with LSD.
Okay.
It's a little bit more energetic than microdosing with psilocybin. I wouldn't, to each their own. I think it's a little bit more purpose driven. If you want to say maybe go to a concert or something that's a little bit more higher energy, that might be a good usage of it. Maybe on the higher end of the microdosing realm for that. Or maybe you're going, I don't know, whatever it might be, like playing some beach volleyball with some friends. Not that you can't do it on a microdose of psilocybin, but there's just a little bit more of an energetic component to like an LSD microdose.
And would that be like 10 mics or 15 mics?
And it's also very hard to
judge mics.
To judge it, to measure it. It's just not as user friendly. So if you have access to that, you feel comfortable with it, sure. But for someone who's just not comfortable with that, I wouldn't even bother, to be honest. Like microdosing mushrooms is amazing, and especially if you have a measured, calculated source of it, then it's great.
So I've used Muse. I don't know if any of you guys have tried that here. I think that's what is that, 125 milligrams, something like that? I feel like it's really easy to pick up and use.
Yeah, you know exactly what you're taking.
Right, you know what you're taking. And how does strains affect all this? Because people talk big game about penis envy and, rhino killer, or whatever the other ones are. What's your take on strains? How do they work? Is there a difference between these compounds? And
totally, yeah. So they have some funny names. So, I mean, there's definitely, there's albino penis envy. It's just some of the names that someone thought of a while back. Definitely different strains have different effects. Just like with cannabis, there's sativa, there's indica. There's a whole cannabinoid profile in cannabis, similar in psilocybin. So there is like an entourage effect. Obviously, like psilocybin and psilocin are like the two sort of active ones. But there is an entourage effect, exactly what those other kind of, you say cannabinoids, just for the sake of this, what exactly they do, we're sort of figuring that out still. But there's definitely strains that are better for focusing for microdosing, and definitely other strains that are better for like macrodosing, going deeper with it.
So would that be like penis envy?
Yeah.
I know is one of the strongest.
Yeah.
Is that more visual? Would it be like more visual, more headspace? How would you break down kind of the categories? Body high, head high? Yeah,
it's definitely more visually heavy, but definitely more, definitely more in the body. I've microdosed with it before. It's hard to be focused with it on a microdose because it's just more powerful. So there's more of the active ingredients like psilocin, which is a psychoactive compound in psilocybin. There's more of that in albino penis envy compared to like a golden teacher, which is a great mushroom for microdosing.
I think that's a lot of good information because it's kind of hard to figure out. Some people are such strain heads. They're like, I only use penis envy, or I only get golden teachers or Thai. So I think that's cool stuff. And do different. So how would you recommend if you can't buy the capsules, would you say grind it up and lemon tech it, or what would be the simplest way? Just weigh it out and eat it in the morning
for
microdosing.
For microdosing,
yeah.
For microdosing, I would highly recommend like taking like a measured capsule from like a brand like Muse that can you actually know how much is in there. So every single time you're taking a measured, calculated dose, so you get to choose what part of the pool you're in. You're not going to the deep end or something like that, right? If you feel called to doing it yourself, like grinding it up and encapsulating, it's sort of a pain in the ass. But definitely know how much you're putting into each capsule. And if you're going to do a macrodose, you said the lemon tech, adding lemon juice to raw mushrooms helps with like digesting it. If you have GI issues with that, you don't necessarily need to do that with the microdose. So unless you're real sensitive in your stomach.
Would that also, so that would reduce kind of the stomach discomfort, the lemon tech would?
Yeah, that's what they say.
Okay.
Yeah.
So are you familiar with some of the substitute tryptamines? I know you're a little bit of a psychonaut. First off, what is a psychonaut to you, and what are some interesting compounds out there that you have a fascination with?
I'd say a psychonaut is someone just interested in altered states of consciousness, and it could be from breath work, it could be from psychedelic drugs. Just interested in exploring what else this sort of human consciousness experience that there is. It's not just this day-to-day one form of consciousness that we're used to. Every single tribal society throughout history has some sort of psychedelic practice that they practice. Even animals try to get high if they're able to. Like dolphins suck on puffer fishes, and jaguars chew on ayahuasca root barks and bark in the jungle. So we're always kind of seeking to alter our states of consciousness. So I think we're all psychonauts to some degree. We might not even just realize it. So
on that note, is there anything that you're particularly interested in compound-wise that we might not be familiar with, or that you think there's a lot of potential either recreationally or medicinally?
I mean, I think there's definitely a limit of I think the more generally known ones, ayahuasca, LSD, psilocybin, things like that, are definitely more of the traditional ones. Are definitely, we know about them. We know about the benefits. Some of these newer ones that are coming out, these more chemical ones, I'm not so much of a fan of personally, just because there's not a whole lot of research done behind it. Like we were talking earlier about 2CB. That's another chemically derived psychedelic drug that's similar to MDMA, and I wouldn't really advise someone to go try that unless they were experienced and they were feeling called to that. But someone who's interested in altered states of consciousness, interested in psychedelic drugs, sticking with the basics of MDMA, psilocybin, and even LSD if you feel called to it too. But I think you can't really go wrong with exploring MDMA in a safe setting and exploring psilocybin in a safe, controlled setting.
So something that I find really interesting is kind of the phenomenology of what, for people that haven't tried mushrooms or haven't tried LSD or haven't tried some of these other psychedelic compounds, what is the phenomenology of like the LSD experience versus the mushroom experience? And what do you think how do they compare and contrast? And what do you think one might be good for? Like, for example, you said microdosing.
Yeah.
It's a little bit speedier in a sense,
Sure.
a little bit more like, I don't like the word Adderall vibe, but a little bit speedier. What do you think you get out of these two different compounds and how can people use them?
So LSD compared to psilocybin?
For example.
So psilocybin is definitely much more grounding. You definitely feel much more connected with nature, with yourself, with everyone. You feel very much like feel very loving. It's just a very grounding substance. The state of consciousness that you get put into is very just grounding and of the earth. You want to be in nature. I want to advise doing a big, a macrodose experience and going somewhere public. I would say definitely go into nature. Even doing it inside in a artificial environment like this with walls that are squared and everything like that. I want to be outside if I'm doing a macrodose experience. It's a very intimate thing. Whereas with LSD, my experience with it isn't nearly as much as it is with psilocybin. It's definitely more of an energetic thing. So being in a space like this where it's more of a party atmosphere, where you want to do it in a controlled manner, that might be more of your go-to, but just know that it's a longer experience. The half-life of that is much longer. So if you buy the ticket, you got to take the ride. So just know, safety is a big thing with this. So just know how much you're doing. You could always, take more. You can never take less. So start slow and you could always increase from there.
And so do you think there's anything objective or consistent that we can access in either visually or through our senses when we engage in these different entheogens?
Sorry, repeat it.
Is there anything like objective or consistent that we're actually accessing, or do you believe it's a highly subjective experience, or do you think you're actually tapping? Because I've heard people say we were both tripping and we both saw, I don't know, the snake together. So potentially there's an objective entity or something like that. Or what's your experience with entities, if you've seen any? Or what is an entity to you on mushrooms?
I wouldn't say entities. I haven't seen entities on mushrooms. I haven't personally done ayahuasca yet or an NDMT. So that's typically where you see entities or you tap into those different realms. I don't think this realm, this dimension that we live in right now is the only thing that is out there. If you think about what the universe is, it's literally, it goes off into infinity. So, the theory that we're having the same conversation of, infinity different ways into oblivion is, I believe that more so than I don't believe it. So I feel like when you alter your states of consciousness, you tap into potentially different realities that who says that's not any more real than what this is right here. But, if you're in, those different realms, you're pretty deep. That's a pretty macro experience. And if you're going to go journey there, like do it with intention and build up to that. Don't just go straight for the God shot.
Well, and have you had any, very profound experiences? 'Cause sometimes you talk to people and they're like, I took 6 or 7 grams of mushrooms. I merged with Godhead. I became Brahma. I experienced Atman. And then you're like, well, that's really great. But how has that contributed to the day afterwards? How do you carry on a large experience? Yeah, how do you integrate it?
Yeah, that's something that's real important. That if there's a time and place for playing, which is more of that middle ground of usage of something like psilocybin. But when you're going deep, especially into like the heroic dosaging, which is like 4 grams and up, you definitely want to be aware of integrating this, how you can apply this into your day-to-day life. So you might come into it with intentions. So hey, I want to look at I want to put myself up for examination when my ego is now dissolved, and I can look at myself from an unbiased point of view, and I could analyze maybe some things I could release from myself in life or improve from it in my life, whatever that might be. And then afterwards, meditate on that, work on that, journal on that. So you have a practice of going back to your experience and integrating it actually into your life.
Can you give me an example? I mean, you spoke about the mountaintop, which seems really profound.
Yeah.
But when you're working with different clients, do you consult with them? I mean, you do microdose coaching.
Yeah.
Do they also talk to you? I mean, you seem like a knowledgeable guy. Do
Yeah.
they talk to you about some of their larger experiences?
Sure, yeah, absolutely.
So could you give me an example potentially of someone's experience or something that you heard about? Because I've just run into a lot of people that have these 5 or 6 gram experiences. And like I had a friend, he goes, I learned animals are awesome. And I think that's an insight for sure.
Yeah, sure.
Do you have anything to say about that?
Yeah, there's takeaways. Like, you when your ego is dissolved, your normal waking state of consciousness is offline. Now you're able to create these new neurocognitive pathways where you might look at something like, animals are awesome, right? That you otherwise before you didn't like dogs, but you realize that this is the pure embodiment of love and kindness right here, and that I should probably embody more of that myself. And I can learn from that dog. Or that you might have you could gone your whole life and never embodied that unless you were in that state of consciousness. I know for myself, you're talking about playing around in that different realm of things that you've taken back from that. I was on a journey in Sedona once on top of a mountain. I like to climb mountains and eat mushrooms for fun, and also to do work on. I was with a group of friends, and we actually heard some Native American flutes playing, and no one was out. We were in the middle of nowhere, and me and a few other people actually heard Native American flutes playing, and that was pretty wild because there's no one around us for miles, and it was playing for a little while. And I was pretty amazed to hear that and tap into that nature of and that just whatever that is there, and that's the soul of the soul of the area. Sedona's a very spiritual place.
And that sounds a lot like the objective. Maybe you tapped into the objective flute experience of Sedona.
Exactly.
And Sedona's a pretty wild place anyway.
Yeah,
so
the vortex there, it's very cool.
What's the vortex like on mushrooms?
I don't know. Just more powerful. Yeah, you definitely feel an energy there. It's hard to put words to it. You definitely feel an energy though in Sedona.
Okay, right on. So how does this play into the breath work? Because you were one of the first, is that right? One of the first Wim Hof breath work? Was it? Did the psychedelics lead you there? The spirituality lead you there? Or how did you find Wim?
Yeah, so I actually learned about, you guys know who Wim Hof is, by the way, for the most part? So Wim Hof is a Dutch gentleman, who's basically made like lifelong pilgrimages to like Tibet and India and learned from these monks that have like figured out things that kind of defies like science essentially. So there things like they've studied some of these monks where they can change like the temperatures on their fingers from like 10 degrees from one finger to the next. It's pretty wild. So he's taken some of these methodologies that they picked up from back there and brought them to the Western world via science, which is like the Western world's religion. So he's basically shown that through his breathing practice and his level of kind of focus that you could tap into the innate immune system and adjust it at will, which defies what we understand is possible. So people have called him like a kook and whatever else, but then he actually got tested in a scientific setting, actually proven that you could tap into the immune system and influence it through doing this breathing practices. So I had heard him on a podcast back in 2015 and said that really speaks to me because I grew up in this medical household. So that's, I understand science. That makes sense. So now here's this guy, doing these things, these Eastern practices I'm starting to become more interested in and proving it through science. So like it's connecting the two worlds, and he's kind of the first person to ever really do that. So that really spoke to me. So I got certified in that because it was just natural progression of doing it myself. I did the breathwork the first time I did the breathwork practice. There's something happened. Like you feel energy pulsing through your body. You feel yourself go into a very deep state of consciousness, of meditation that I had never been to before, and it happened the very first time. And I thought that was pretty cool. And then the biggest test of it all for me at the time was my old man was, like I said before, he's a retired surgeon now, but the most skeptical guy of anything like Eastern oriented. But I had shown him this documentary where they actually injected Wim with E. coli, and that should give you a violent immune response, but you should have every whole you should have throwing up and everything else should be happening if you have E. coli come into your system. But he had done his breathwork protocol and boosted his immune system and had no immune response from the E. coli, which is amazing. So when I had showed my old man that, actually it blew his mind that was possible. So he was interested to do that breathing protocol. So we actually laid down and did breath work. And to this day, he actually does a breath work every single morning to this day, which is pretty cool.
So was he, as I recall, he's injected and then he starts doing the breathing techniques, or has he put himself into such a state where his body kind of naturally fights
So
off
he's
the
injected and then proceeds to do, his rounds of breathing. I actually had a similar experience myself on another backpacking trip. I was actually stung by a wasp, and it was after a long day of hike. I was dehydrated. It stung me right here on my chest, and I actually went anaphylactic. My windpipe closed up. I broke out in hives all over my body. And I didn't have an EpiPen or anything with me. It was 15 miles from the trailhead. So the only thing I had with me was my knowledge of this method. So I laid down and did the breathing protocol, for like 30 minutes straight. Heavy duty was power breathing, with some breath holds mixed in as well. And the hives went down, my air pipe opened back up, and I was just fine. Yeah.
Because what I saw was he taught people over the course of 10 days how to fight off the E. coli with Are you sure?
Mm-mm. Yeah, positive. So he replicated that study. Okay. He replicated that study because everyone said you're just a superhuman. You're different. They try to write him off, right? Mm-hmm. So he replicated the study a year later with a control group that he had just taught the method to for like a few hours, and then a control group that had no training. So they were both injected separately. That group got violently ill, as they should, and this group was just fine. So that's sealed. And there's literally biology books now with chapters on him now. Pretty cool.
Right. I think that's what I was referring to. He taught them how, and then they were able to fight it off.
Yeah.
Right. So what is the Wim Hof? Is it, because many people have seen the app, it's, tell us more about what really goes into it. What's going on in your body and why does it work?
Yeah. I was teaching a class last night. So I'll do classes periodically and I'll do full workshops just to share the method with people. It's a little bit intensive to do it like in a setting like this right now, but just for the sake of explaining it, it's a series of deep, powerful breaths where you're filling up your full capacity of your lungs and letting it out through your mouth every single time. About 30 to 50 breaths, deeply in, letting it go. After about 30 to 50 breaths, you let everything go and you hold your breath on the exhalation. You hold your breath for as long as you can. Whenever you feel the initial urge to breathe, try to surrender, try to go deeper, because this is just your nervous system. This is just your mind trying to breathe in. When in reality, you have got plenty of oxygen in your arterial system. You could go much deeper. So that's kind of like the warning light on the dashboard, freaking out, and then you developing this new neuroplasticity of calming it down and allowing yourself to go deeper. So it's a beautiful life practice. And whenever you feel that second sensation to breathe, then you take a deep breath and you hold that breath for 20 seconds. And basically, that's the Wim Hof method with a little bow tie on it. I've modified it, made it my own, give people a very deep, powerful experience. But that's the Wim Hof method, essentially.
And so would that
for the breathwork component of it.
And so would that be one of the classes that you teach as you go through? And so how long does that typically last for? What's a total protocol? Or
so if I do a class, it's about an hour experience. If I do a full workshop, it's about a 4-hour experience.
And so I did some breath work. I think it was conscious breathing, or it wasn't holotropic breathing, but it was something kind of along those lines with that kind of experience. And so what type of experiences would people be having? I had a profound experience with blinding. I was telling you about it. Blinding bright white light. I mean, it was like taking a large amount of LSD. I found it absolutely profound. What are people saying, and how does that say compared to the psychedelic experience?
So it is psychedelic. So it's an altered state of consciousness. Psychedelic. You can get to a psychedelic state through an endogenous, production of your, endogenously produced psychedelics, which is like DMT, or just the quieting down of your thinking brain. Or you could take a substance, right? You could get there. It's just a different tool to enhance your consciousness, essentially. So through the breathing component of it. The breathing practice I had you guys do at the beginning of this practice, that's a good breath work to give you a nice homeostasis. Your breath is controlled by your nervous system. Your autonomic nervous system is responsible for 100 plus different functions in the human body every single day. It's automatic. It's outside of our human control. It just happens automatically. We can't control it. The only thing that we can control is our breath. So because you can control your breath, you could tap into the rest of the nervous system and adjust it at will, which is really interesting. So you could wind yourself up, make yourself more kind of in a fight or flight state. You can also put yourself in a very much in a rest and digest state just by controlling your breathing. It's like a domino effect. Once you push one, the rest of them follow suit. So you could calibrate your state of consciousness throughout the day just by breathing. That 6-6 breathing protocol is how we should be breathing all day long. That equates to 6 breaths per minute. The average person takes 22 breaths per minute. So what does that tell our nervous system? That we're more stressed than we should be. So if you take some time throughout the day to slow that down to 6 breaths per minute, you can create a nice balanced homeostasis. When it comes to having a psychedelic experience like that you had from say conscious or what would you call it?
Conscious breath
Breathwork, yeah, or holotropic breathwork is very psychedelic. Wim Hof Method can be very psychedelic as well, because you're doing these deep, powerful breaths, and you're actually playing with your chemistry levels in your cells and in your bloodstream. So when you do the Wim Hof Method or holotropic breathwork, you blow off a lot of CO2. So CO2 is our vasodilator, constricts or expands our blood vessels. So when you have very little CO2 in the system, it constricts your blood vessels and prevents oxygen and blood from going to your head and to your extremities. So that's why like when you get cold, your blood vessels shut and your hands and feet are very cold compared to like what your core is. This needs to stay in a nice warm blood bath, right? So when it shunts from your head, and now it's down regulating your brain, your thinking brain. This is where your ego lives. So when that gets down regulated, then you're able to have psychedelic like experiences. When you're on psychedelics, you take a psychedelic substance like mushrooms or LSD, this thinking area of the brain gets down regulated as well. So the same thing is happening. You're just getting to it through breathing, not through a substance such as psilocybin. But you can have a very, very similar experience with the thinking brain down regulated and now able to have these sort of expanded states of consciousness come in. And also have secretions of your own endogenous production of DMT, which the pineal gland actually secretes, and which we experience when we're dreaming and we have very intense life experiences.
So I've heard, have you read the book by Breathe by James Nestor? Mm-hmm. Really fantastic book.
Yeah,
I'd
great
suggest
book.
Everyone should read it.
Yep.
He talks about breathing in through your nose, and he says you should almost never, at least I think you should never breathe in through your mouth. Is that right? In general?
Never.
Right. So why does that work? And tell us about that.
Yeah. So I could go deep down this. So I saw some of you guys exhaling through your mouth during the breathing protocol that we did before. Whenever you do a breathwork practice like this, try to practice breathing through your nose when you do like a homeostasis breathwork like that, because you want to train your subconscious to breathe through your nose all day long. Your nose is meant for breathing and breathing only, whereas your mouth is meant for eating and breathing when you have to. So if you're in a very stressed state of being, you're pushing yourself in a hard workout, you're doing some sprints, or you're in a boxing match or something like that, and you have to, because your heart rate is at such a level that you want to maintain this workload, you need to offload the CO2 because it's building up. You need to get it out faster. So you should think about your breath like gears in a car. If you're thinking about it from a performance standpoint, first gear would be in through your nose and out through your nose. That's where most of life lives at. And now if you're in a little bit more ramped up state of physical activity, maybe in through your nose, out through your nose faster, which is second gear. And then third gear would be in through your nose, out through your mouth. And then finally you get to mouth. But you work your way up there. You don't just go there. So catch yourself throughout the day. If you catch yourself breathing in and out of your mouth, you're telling the nervous system that you're more stressed than you should be, because mouth breathing is a stressful form of breathing. The mouth doesn't have the sinuses, which the nose does. The sinuses actually heats or cools and conditions the air to the correct humidity level that our lungs like to diffuse the oxygen from the air into our bloodstream. So you're getting, and then it's also nitric oxide production, which helps with shuttling the oxygen into our cells. And oxygen is the key ingredient for life. You need it for everything from energy production and just to be alive. It breaks down the carbon molecular structure of our food. It's literally life. Breath is life. So how you breathe is how you live. So yes, day-to-day basis, you want to be breathing through your nose, using the mouth as a tool to go push yourself harder in workouts, or to take yourself deeper in particular breathwork practices. So you can do Wim Hof Method, mouth, breathing in through your mouth and out through your mouth. You can move more air, but it's like you're working out. You don't work out all day long. You work out for an hour. You don't do Wim Hof Method all day long. You do it for half an hour or something like that, right? So it's a workout. It's not daily homeostasis breathing.
Yeah, it's one of those things. They should have ads that say "Do not breathe through your mouth" or something like that.
Well, being a mouth breather literally is it's a derogatory term. Like, look at that mouth breather over there. It's derogatory. You know what I'm talking about. You've seen people in public with slack jaw. They don't look. They look kind of like not like something's wrong, right? So if you ever catch yourself breathing through your mouth, just close your mouth, breathe through your nose. And doing practices like the 6-6 breathing that you just did right now, if you set a reminder in your phone to do it a few times throughout the day, you'll influence your subconscious to develop that circuitry to be more likely to breathe like that when you're going in autopilot mode.
So are there any apps that you'd recommend that are good breathing apps? I mean, I know Wim has his app. That's a pretty good one. You can set your alarm clock and it wakes you up, and then you can do your big breaths. There's another one that's good for like box breath, or you can set the time in to follow.
Yeah, there's one. I think it's called just Breathe. It's like an orange circle. If anyone wants to find that, just come find me afterwards. I'll show you on my phone. And there's different like breaths you can do. You can do like a 1-2 breath, which is in for say 6 and out for 12. So it's doubling the exhale from the inhalation. And whenever you extend the exhalation, it's actually associated with calming down the nervous system. So when you inhale, it increases your heart rate. When you exhale, it decreases your heart rate. So if you extend your exhalation, it'll slow down your heart rate even more. So 1-2 breath would be good for when you're feeling stressed, when you're feeling anxious. 4-7-8 breath work is 4 seconds in, 7 seconds hold, and 8 seconds out. This is great for stress reduction. This is good for before bed when you want to really slow down and calm down. And if you want to get excited, then you could definitely breathe a little bit faster and excite your nervous system. So you could play around with your breath. It's a tool.
So the one, if you wanted to say wake up a little bit, would that be the?
I would say Wim Hof Method. I like Wim Hof Method because you're doing deep, powerful breaths. You're breathing more than you would in the state of homeostasis, but you're doing these breath holds to bring in the other side of the nervous system. So one side you have your sympathetic side of the nervous system, which is fight or flight, the far end, and the other side is the parasympathetic, which is rest and digest. So when you're doing these deep, powerful breaths, you're going over here, right? But then when you're doing these breath holds now, you're going over there. So now you have a more balanced homeostasis during the daytime. And actually during the breath hold is where a lot of the magic happens as far as alkalining your cells. So you could raise your cellular alkalinity up to a pH of 8. Majority of us walk around very acidic. We don't even know it because we're poor breathers. So the way you breathe is how you live, and it's how your body operates. So if you're over breathing on a daily basis, you're not getting the proper oxygen saturation into your cells as you should be.
So I think you kind of covered this, but parasympathetic, sympathetic, I know that's a big term. How does breathing kind of play into the parasympathetic and sympathetic? Is it putting, like when you breathe well, does it put you into parasympathetic? More
so, yeah. So if you think about your nervous system on a line graph, there's two polar extremes: fight or flight, rest and digest. Sympathetic, parasympathetic. We fluctuate all day long here. The problem is that we live too much of our lives over here, which it's unintentionally, right? Just because we're so stressed out, we have this thing in our pocket that dictates so much of our day that sends probably more stress to us than anything, right? We're overstimulated out there. We have more stimulation on a day-to-day basis now than we did in a lifetime 500 years ago. So what does that do to your nervous system? Your body keeps the score, right? Just like that book says. Your body literally keeps the score of your outside environment. So it's going to replicate that. Your heart rate will be more increased. You'll be more anxious. You'll be more stressed than you ultimately want to be. And you could control that and influence it with the breath. So if a majority of us live here too much, we could put ourselves over here more so with our breath and controlling our breath. And that's really cool.
And that would be, over there would be sympathetic, and then over here would be
the far sides, yeah.
Parasympathetic.
Not to say that visiting over here is cool. There's a state right below fight or flight, which is called excite and delight. So this is like where a lot of flow state happens. So we've all heard of flow state more or less. You've heard like Michael Jordan taps into flow and he takes over the basketball game, or the big wave surfer is on the wave and he's completely in the moment. It's a very euphoric state of being, but you're very, very present. You can say it's a meditative state because you're extremely present, right? But that's associated with a level of fear or risk, application mixed into that. So it's an exciting place to be. If you're snowboarding or whatever it might be, you could say, very passionate, sex could be that as well. So that's a place to visit, but once again, like you want to reside more so on that side of the nervous system, not so much where you're zen out all day long, but a nice kind of mixture of the two.
And do brain waves fall into there at all, like beta,
sure.
Alpha, theta?
Yeah.
Does it help optimize likewise? So it's optimizing your nervous system and then optimizing your brain waves. Do you have any knowledge on that as far as breath work?
Yeah, 100%. So like obviously with different states of consciousness, your brain waves are going to fluctuate and, adjust with that. So, it really, once you get into more of a consistent meditative practice, your brain waves will adjust and will change, because you're recreating how your brain's wiring and firing.
And so what does your meditative practice look like? Or do you have any schools like that you adhere to, or certain techniques?
Yeah, so I mean, no, you're all good. That would be me typically. I'd be that guy. Meditation is a state of being radically present. You could find that in sitting up and doing traditional like lotus pose, like TM meditation. You could find it, doing breath work. You could find it, going for a walk, right, where you're just being very, very present with yourself. I think a lot of us, who here has tried meditation before? How many times, or would you say you always drop into that flow that you want to get into every single time? None of us, right? It's hard, right? It's hard to quiet down the monkey brain, right? So developing like a traditional sitting up and closing your eyes and just being very, very still with yourself. It's hard for our Western brains to calm down because we have so much stimulation coming into us all the time. So doing something like Wim Hof Method or particular breathwork practices, you can harness control of that breath. When you learn a traditional breathing or a meditation technique, first thing you learn how to do is how to breathe. When a little monk goes to monk school at 5 years old, the first thing they teach him how to do is how to breathe. So you could do, you could think of meditation as much more than just sitting up straight and, focusing on being present. You could think of meditation as doing a breathwork practice. You could think of meditation as doing like going for a run where you're very, very present with yourself. Runner's high is a very deep state of consciousness that's very altered as well. It's a real thing. You have neurochemistry being secreted that makes you feel very altered, and it's very, pleasurable and addicting that keeps people coming back. You could say going for a swim. Cold plunge is very, very meditative because you're trying to focus on not dying in this cold water. You're very, very radically present. It forces you into presence. So I encourage everyone to look at meditation from a different colored lens. That it doesn't just have to be this traditional way that's very hard for our Western brains to grasp. I think that's fantastic, and people should practice that, like traditional meditation, but to explore other ways to tap into a meditative state, such as breath work or, whatever else.
Right. I go skiing a lot. I feel like skiing's a really fun, kind of active meditative
Can't do it too often
state.
here in Santa Barbara, though.
It's not very good, the conditions here. There's not a lot of snow, sadly. But I also think likewise, like you were saying, there's so many different meditative techniques. I think of breathing meditation. That'd be kind of a vipassana where you just focus on your breath. Yeah. You can do zazen.
You could do it while you drive. You could do it while you drive. While you drive, you do that 6 breathing practice and just see see how far you can go with before your mind starts wandering, and just bring it back, just like you would a normal meditation. Go for a walk the dog, same thing. Leave your phone at home, or don't take your phone out of your pocket, and just try to be in tune with everything that you're doing. Once your brain wanders to whatever, wherever it goes, just bring it back to being very, very present and noticing the beauty of the world. That's a big one. Witnessing beauty is a good way to tell that you're present. And what's one thing when I had that first mushroom experience on top of that mountain back in 2018 was I realized how fucking beautiful the world is, how beautiful life is. Life is amazing, and it's a lot of us don't see that. We don't see that. Everywhere you go, you can find beauty in whatever it might be. That's artwork, just a simple bush, right, or a plant, flower. There's beauty all around us. And just we're too busy rushing to get to nowhere that we forget about that. So if you think about the first time you drove, say you drove to work, you bought a new house somewhere, or you were living somewhere new, and you're driving to work on a new route, and you're noticing some of the vegetation around you, and you're saying, "Oh, that's kind of pretty." Maybe in the back of your head, you're noticing some of the beautiful, aspects of life. The 10th day you drove to work on that route, you're not going to notice those things anymore, because the ego is like that's not keeping us alive. The ego is all about keeping you alive and safe, not about keeping you happy. And the more you witness the beauties of life, the more happy you are, because you're more present.
Do you know who Sadhguru is?
Yeah.
Does anyone here know who Sadhguru Anyways, he did
He's
this.
great.
He recommended something that I tried during COVID because everything was shut down when I was living in Santa Fe. And he said, hike the same hike every day for 20 days and notice something different. And it was cool because every time I'd look around, I'd be like, oh, you know what? I think that log fell, or there's some more blue. It was actually a really great practice, hiking it alone
100%.
And trying to check out new things.
Being in all of the world.
Exactly.
It's fucking amazing.
And this was
life's
too.
incredible. It's incredible. And then the fact that we get to be conscious, healthy beings is also a blessing as well. Like imagine not being able to have like the luxuries that you have with us. There's so many humans and people out there that don't have what we all have in this room. We could walk around. We could go do some amazing things in life that some people would love to be able to do. So appreciating that aspect that we take for granted. Don't take for granted some of the little things that you just gloss over every single day. When you bring the gratitude to those practices, it enriches your life massively.
So just to circle back real quick, when I think of Wim Hof, I mean the Iceman. What's the deal with ice baths? And how do they kind of supercharge the nervous system? If they do that at all.
No, 100%. So everyone's always kind of interested in the scientific component of ice bathing, which is fantastic and it's great. For me, I really love the mental side of things more so because, like I alluded to before, it's a form of meditation. It's a form of self-discipline to be able to go into something that is stronger than you. Mother Nature is stronger than you. The cold is stronger than you. You're not going to beat it no matter what. So you have to surrender to it if you want to survive in that element. If you want to survive for longer in that element, if you go in there and try to fight it and try to like force your way, brute force your way through it, yeah, you might be able to like endure it for a bit, but you're not gonna be able to go for as long as if you were calm and relaxed. When you get in there, your nervous system says, shit, fight or flight, way over here, right? Your breathing starts, going through the roof. You start getting stressed out, because that's how your body says, like, hey, you need to stay alive. Like, this isn't, we're not supposed to be in here because, in, more evolutionary times, if you fell into ice cold water, it typically means you might die. You're not really evolved to like have a nice ice bath that just sits on the side of your house that you can just go into all the time. But since we live in this day and age that we can do that, when you go into the ice bath and you focus on controlling your breath, because like I said before, with the breath, you can control the nervous system. So if you slow down the breathing and bring your attention to the breath and elongate the breaths, you can actually take yourself from over there on the more stressed side of the nervous system and bring yourself to a more calm side of the nervous system, from fight or flight to rest and digest. So after about a minute or so, your nervous system will make an adaptation. Your subconscious, your body will say, like, okay, well, this guy's not getting out of here. So we need to keep him alive for as long as possible now. So instead of being very energy inefficient, where your heart's beating, your blood pressure's through the roof, you're going to go very, very energy efficient. So your heart rate's going to slow way down. Everything's going to slow way, way, way down because you've just overridden your physiology through conscious focus and breathing. So when that happens, your heart rate goes way below baseline because now the body's preparing to keep you alive for as long as possible in this stressful environment. And that's where this very, very beautiful state of meditation comes into play, because now you're in a very, very parasympathetic state in this stressful circumstance, which is amazing. The power of that, the power of the cold it's a great teacher. It's righteous, but it's just. And on the physiological side of things, it's very good for inflammation, for people with arthritis, all kinds of different autoimmune disorders, just like the breathwork is as well. So there's amazing scientific components to it too.
And I know Wim, when his wife died, he said ice therapy was one of the things that really got him through it because he had to face the intensity of the present moment. Would you recommend the same thing for depression, anxiety, things like that? Well,
you're gonna get 200% increase in dopamine. You're gonna get 300% increase in serotonin. So you're gonna get you're gonna feel amazing afterwards because now your body's surcharging itself because you've just overcome this like amazing stress. Who feels good after you work out? Everyone does. It's endorphins. So it's like you get a reward from this good stress that you're putting onto your body. So just like working out, it's a good stress. There's bad stress and there's good stress, and you could overdo the good stress to where it becomes bad stress. So everything in moderation, right? So you don't ice bath all day long, but if you were to do an ice bath, maybe do it like a handful of days a week and build your way up, and then go take it piece by piece, right? And you could do cold showers at home. Right now the water's not very cold, but you could do that. The ocean's cold. You could go in there, stay in there for 5 minutes. Work your way up. Maybe do 30 seconds. Maybe do a minute a week later. Maybe do 2 minutes. You could work your way up. And there's different ways to have exposure to the cold. You'll use that as a teacher and ultimately improve your human vessel that you have.
Mushroom ice baths.
That could be a thing. Definitely. Maybe not. I would definitely say not a macrodose. It probably would be too stressing for a very vulnerable place. But definitely a microdose would help you be much more intentional and present with that experience for sure. I've done that. I've incorporated microdosing into workshops I've done before where I had the ice bath component there.
And did people report back like, oh,
they said it was great?
Yeah,
yep.
I bet it would be like maybe even a little bit easier
to
make it through.
Yeah, because you're more focused. You're more present with the experience. You're less like, oh my God, this is a lot. This is a lot. You're more in tune. Like, hey, I've got this. I'm very present with this right now. I've got this. I can make this adaptation much quicker.
I listened to Wim Hof talk, and he said even putting your hand in a cup of ice is he's like, if you don't have enough ice for an ice bath, he goes, get a huge cup and stick your hand in. And I will say, I'd done ice baths. It was almost more intense sticking my hand in it and being here.
Your nervous system can't make the adaptation when your hand is just in it. So typically when people do ice baths, if you want the full adaptation of the nervous system, you need to go like heart below the water, so shoulders all the way down. And then you'll make the adaptation much quicker and easier. When it's just your hand has tremendous amount of blood vessels. If you touch your fingers, it goes from for me it goes from red to white. So that's all blood vessels. We have enough blood vessels in our body to wrap around the earth 3 times if they were all laid out in a straight line. It's wild. Each blood vessel is encapsulated with a muscular sheath. So that muscular sheath constricts or dilates. So in your hand, you have a tremendous amount of them because that's where we have all our nerve endings to touch and to feel and to sense the world. So when you put your hand in cold water, and if you're not used to that, the muscular sheath is sort of atrophied to something so extreme like that. So it constricts and it's very painful. But the more you do it, the stronger that muscular sheath becomes, and the easier you can adapt to that environment. And ultimately, it's not as painful anymore. And ultimately, your cardiovascular health will dramatically improve because now you're more efficient at moving blood throughout your body. So your blood pressure will reduce and your heart rate ultimately will reduce as well. So your cardiologist would probably like that for you.
And the toughening of the sheath, did you say exactly what that does?
Yeah, it's strengthening. So that muscular sheath that encapsulates your blood vessels, it's responsible for either constricting blood vessels or dilating them. So if you're sweating, then it's dilated. So blood's moving faster throughout your body to deliver oxygen to the cells in your body. If you're colder or if you're not working out, then it's gonna be a little bit more constricted.
Awesome. All right. Yeah. Well, so we have our change your lens questions that we ask every single person that's here. We just wanted a good slice of different people answering these questions. So we're going to start off with something simple. What person or book most inspired you or influenced you? Or you had in the top 3.
I mean there's definitely a lot of books, man. I'd say recently, in the past period of my life, How to Change Your Mind by Michael Pollan.
Just keep going.
Ignore that. That's yeah. Here he is. That was a great book that really explained sort of how the mind worked via the vehicle of psychedelics. On a more fictional book, it's more like historical fiction. A book called Musashi. That's a story of like the most prolific Japanese sword fighter of all time. And he wasn't just a master of the sword, but it was also of like all the arts from like Japanese writing to like this tea ceremony, and it's you follow the story of how he became this master of life. And it's a really beautiful book. It's like a doorstop of a book, like 1,000 pages. That helped me. It was a really powerful book at a transformative period of my life. Let's see, I have so many books at home. My shelf is stocked up. Stealing Fire is an amazing book by Jamie Wheel and Stephen Kotler. It's all about flow states and how different states of consciousness you could tap into them through a lot of different things. Everything from psychedelics to group flow with like the SEAL teams, or with like a group breathwork class. When you're doing a group activity together, you definitely can tap into like a shared collective consciousness. Even BDSM, like that's what they talked about in the book. So those are some of mine. I definitely have a lot more. I have books all over my house. What was that?
Jamie Wheel's really great.
Yeah,
Have you read
right.
Recapturing the Rapture as well?
Yeah,
I think that was his newest one.
That's a good one. Yeah,
Great book. You guys should check it out. So this question comes from, I saw it said Bank of America did a study and it's a 60% chance that we're in a simulation, which I thought was odd for Bank of America to conduct such a study. So do you think we're in a simulation? And I guess what would a simulation be?
So it's hard to be definitive about it. I think with consciousness exploration, I definitely think that, it's very likely we could be, because this goes on to, this existence goes on to infinity, right? The Big Bang Theory just got debunked recently. There's no explanation of how this got started, right? I just saw a great graphic video of like someone. It was graphic design, the way it was done, but someone like was a lady laying on grass like in a park, and it was zoomed out from her into the solar system, into the galaxy, and then ultimately into the universe and into universes. And when you think about all that, like this very likely could be some alien entity that created all of this, right? And this is just the simulation that we're plugged into right now. Who knows? I don't know that, but it very much could be. I think that makes a lot more sense than, and that could be God. Who knows? Then whatever the Judeo-Christian sort of explanation of what this is. I'm not saying that's wrong, because that very well could be right. So what I do know is that, or what I believe is that we are all God. We're all interconnected. I think we're all spiritual beings having a human experience. And when you have very deep, profound states of consciousness, especially in the depths of different psychedelics, you have this sort of connection with everything, this connection with nature. You feel you're one with it, and that makes sense to me. It feels very, I feel very connected with it all. And when you realize that we're all one and the same. And I heard something recently too, that when you lie and cheat on somebody or to somebody, you're really just lying or cheating on yourself. And that hit me pretty deep. We're all the same. We're all the same, living this human experience in just a little bit different way.
I think that was a great answer. So in keeping with that, do you believe in an afterlife, and do you think psychedelics potentially give us any insight into the world to come, if there is one?
I don't know. I've heard about the reincarnation theory, that you reincarnate until you've lived every human experience on Earth. And I thought that was pretty interesting. Who knows? I don't know. I like to believe that there is, but I also think the reincarnation theory makes a lot of sense too. We don't know. I mean, all we can do is just live a life that makes us happy, and enjoy this life for what it is. Is we're not guaranteed tomorrow. All we can do is enjoy this present moment. Tomorrow will come, but you're not going to experience the happiness that you maybe looked over right now.
Are there any chemicals or chemical that you haven't explored that you'd really like to, if given the opportunity, or one that you have tried and you never want to touch again?
I had a powerful experience with Bufo this year. That was very life impacting, and definitely integrated that, and it's been very transformative for sure. I have yet to do ayahuasca, actually. Randomly, I went straight to Bufo before ayahuasca. So I definitely want to do ayahuasca at some point when the time is right. I've had multiple opportunities this year, but I didn't feel in alignment. I felt like I needed to integrate the other experiences that I had from Bufo and a few other journeys with mushrooms and things like that. That I felt like it was rude for not only the medicine, but also disrespectful to myself, just to rush to have another experience. I have the rest of my life to have an experience like that, and to experience more. I think you need to honor yourself and to integrate whatever you're doing, so you absorb all the benefits from it, and be able to experience it for its entirety.
So in the context of the modern psychedelic renaissance, what are you most excited about, or what direction do you see it going in?
I see that the world's waking up. I see that we're waking up to the realities that a lot of people are fucking miserable. A lot of people aren't happy. There's troops with PTSD. There's people with depression and anxiety, and that psychedelics is an amazing tool to give people some alleviation to that and to open their eyes to the beauties of this world, to a conscious existence. It's not a replacement for things like meditation. It's just another tool to get you to a state of consciousness, of enhanced awareness. And when you're in a state like that, you could see that there's more. There's a lot of amazing things to experience in life. So I think more people are realizing that, and we're becoming a more conscious society, a happier, more loving society. So I don't think someone on mushrooms is going to go commit crimes or be a bad citizen on Earth, right? We're going to be a more loving society. When you're on mushrooms, you want to profess your love to people and have camaraderie and do better for society. So the more that we have this, I feel like they really are the tool to really help us be a better overall happier, healthier, and add more longevity to this earth. We're burning the candles at both ends, I'd say, on this earth in a lot of different ways for whatever it means. But I feel like when you enhance the collective consciousness, I think it's really the key to it all.
And so last question, a very simple one. We've danced around it all night. What is the nature of consciousness? And you have 60 seconds.
I think it's your connection with the present moment. When you're present, as I've said a few times tonight, when you're present, that's where life happens. When you're present, you're tapped into it all. You're tapped into the universe. I've had meditative experiences, had psychedelic experiences where I feel I'm at the center of the void of the universe, and you realize I'm just going home. I am the universe. I am God. Everyone is God. This whole thing is God. So when you realize that we're all one and the same, we're all interconnected, the more conscious you are, you're just more connected with that source. You're more connected with God.
That was an awesome answer. Can we get a round of applause for Greg, please?
Thanks, guys.